what you've been exposed to. A zoo may look like the image on the left, and that's an example of a really bad zoo, or it may look like the picture on the right, which is a picture of our zoo, which I feel is a really good zoo. And zoos essentially are any place that houses animals for public display. So there are animals there, people come to visit, and just like with any type of business, there are good ones and there are bad ones, and depending on where you live, you may see more good ones than bad ones, or more bad in also the Australasian region called JAYA, the Zoo and Aquarium Association. The one that's most popular here in the United States is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And that is an accreditation organization that has the highest standards worldwide, and also accredits zoos worldwide. So what does an accreditation really mean? Well, for AZA accredited institutions, zoos and aquariums, we currently have 241 zoos and aquariums that are accredited. They are found in 13 different countries. There are AZA accredited zoos in South America, in South Korea, in Hong Kong, and various parts of the world. Less than 10% of facilities that house animals in the United States meet the standards that are required for AZA accreditation. So the AZA accreditation process allows the best of the best to stand out separate from just what we call roadside zoos, which usually have very low standards, and their reason for existing may be very different as well. AZA accredited institutions currently house over 800,000 animals representing 6,000 species. And cumulatively across all those organizations, they invest over $231 million US in conservation every year. There are also over 500 species survival plans. These are programs where zoos work cooperatively to manage a given species to make sure that that population remains viable for long periods of time, and to make sure that that population stays genetically diverse. There are also 115 reintroduction programs worldwide, and AZA accredited facilities see over 200 million visitors every year. That's more than all of the professional sports organizations combined. So more people visit AZA accredited zoos than attend all of the professional sports games. So the AZA accreditation process consists of an inspection where a team of inspectors, usually at least 3, it includes a veterinarian, someone who specializes in animal management, and someone who has expertise in operations. And they visit a facility for at least 3 days, sometimes longer, to evaluate all of the criteria that you see here. Animal welfare, care, and management are the core of what they're looking at, but they also look at veterinary care and conservation programs and the education and interpretation, scientific advancement, which is kind of our new term for research, how the facility is governed, are the staff well trained, how are the finances, are the buildings in good repair, are the guests receiving the services they need. So it's a very intensive process, and again, has the highest standards of any zoo accreditation process. So when we talk about accredited zoos, that really causes them to stand out above just any zoo. And so why do zoos exist? Well, first, people go to zoos because they want to be entertained. They want to have fun. And in order to remain viable, zoos have to raise funds. And so you have to make money. However, that's just the starting point. Those are not the end goals. For some of the roadside zoos or bad zoos, that's where they stop, provide entertainment and make money. But for accredited zoos, they take it beyond that. We want to create wild places. We want to inspire people to care about those animals. We want to inspire people to care about ecosystems and inspire them to care about the communities where these animals live. And in doing so, we want to create change. We want to create action items where people can change how they live and know that it's having a positive impact on wild animals and wild places across the world. And in doing so, we can conserve wild animals and wild places. That is the ultimate goal. So again, an AZ accredited zoo goes beyond the entertainment and fundraising and really gets to our core mission of inspiring people to care and making change so that animals and wild places can be conserved. So how do accredited zoos then contribute to conservation? I think there are four main ways that we can contribute to conservation the best. First is with animal management and human care. We used to use the term captivity. We don't like that term anymore. So we like to, for some people that gives them bad feelings. So we focus on animal management and human care. And that can include things like reintroduction programs, having assurance populations. And what that means is if an animal population goes extinct in the wild, there are still animals in zoos that can continue going and remain viable. That's been done with the Bali myna, for example. Research on best practices. So we can know, what's the best nutrition? How can we, better understand what these animals need to live? And we also provide consultation for rescue and rehab organizations. Many of the facilities that do in situ rescue and rehabilitation rely on zoos for some of their standards of care. The second way is veterinary expertise. All accredited zoos have veterinarians on staff that are trained to be specialists in wild animals. And so we can provide training opportunities to other veterinarians that may work with these wild species. We can also provide opportunities to research certain medical things, such as the hepatitis B virus that Javan gibbons carry, hepatinovirus. We can also provide consultation to help manage disease of wild populations as well. Zoos do an excellent job of education and outreach. We try to foster a connection to wild animals and wild places and help them understand the challenges that many of these wild animals and places face. That includes some of our conservation messaging. And ultimately, we want people to take action. We don't want them to just know about these problems, but we want them to do something about them. And lastly, with some of the funds that are generated from zoos, we can provide funding to in situ conservation programs, such as Swara Owa. We can also provide education, outreach, lobbying, and enforcement funding so that people in situ countries can do what they need to do to help protect these species. And we can also help to fund some of the rescue and rehabilitation facilities that may be present. So for all species, not all four of these categories exist. For some species, we may only do one or two of these things. But all of those are kind of where zoos and aquariums really have the expertise to be able to help with conservation. So I want to tell you a little bit about my zoo, the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo. This is where we're located, which is just about 3 hours east of Chicago. That's the closest city that many people have heard of. But we're in what's called the Midwest of the United States, which is not near the West at all. So don't know why it's called that, but it doesn't make sense to us either. But that's the entrance to our zoo. Our zoo is about 45 acres or 18.2 hectares. We have about 1,200 animals, and we see about 600,000 visitors every year with a budget of about 11 million US dollars. This is the map of our zoo, and our zoo is divided up into 4 main areas. The central part of the zoo includes our family farm, which includes many domestic species. We have an Australian adventure on the west, which focuses on marsupials and some of the birds from Australia. We have a large loop on the east that focuses on African species. And we are one of the few zoos that I'm aware of that has an entire area dedicated to Indonesia. And so we have a large rainforest dome, and we have orangutans and Sumatran tigers and Javan gibbons and hornbills and a variety of other birds and reptiles and small mammals that help to represent Indonesia to the people of Fort Wayne. So we are one of only 3 US institutions to have Javan gibbons. And this is a picture of some of our Javan gibbons. We're one of only 2 accredited institutions with Javan gibbons. The 3 facilities that have them are us, the Greensboro Science Center, and the Gibbon Conservation Center. The Gibbon Conservation Center is not accredited, but they do great work in bringing advocacy to gibbon species worldwide. We have 2.2 gibbons. That means 2 males, 2 females. Our male is Lionel. He's 19 and a half years old. Our female, Dieng, you may recognize that name, is 18 and a half years old. And then 2 of their youngsters, Kato is 8, and Chinta is 5 and a half years old. And they form our family group. And the interesting thing about Javan gibbons, obviously we can't manage an entire population just between 2 or 3 institutions. This is a species that we work globally to manage. So the zoos in the US work with the zoos in Europe and the zoos in Australia and the Australasian region to work together to maintain one large captive population. So there's a stud bookkeeper that looks at the genetics of all of the captive gibbons and decides who breeds to who to maintain genetic diversity. All of our gibbons, Javan gibbons, are captive born. None of these were taken from the wild. These were all individuals that were born in captivity, often from animals that were confiscated or injured or could not be returned to the wild. So with that, we're able to create an assurance population and also learn a great deal about Javan gibbons in the process. So this is our Javan gibbon exhibit. It is about 5,850 square meters on the exhibit outside. At the back is about 10.7 meters tall. And inside there's about a 62 square meter holding area where you see lots of enrichment. It's where they can go to get out of storms, or we have really cold winters here. So unlike in Indonesia, they need to go inside in the winter time as it gets lots of snow and ice here. This is what our facility looks like. So you see they've got nice natural trees growing up through the exhibit. The vines are artificial vines to allow them to swing and brachiate through the tops of those trees. And they just use every bit of space in this exhibit. It's too large to even fit into one photograph. So talking about those four categories of how zoos contribute to conservation, I want to use some examples of how our zoo, the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo, contributes to Indonesian animal conservation in each of those categories. So for animal management and human cabins, and we are learning more about their nutrition and how they live and their behavior and their reproduction. I didn't have a great picture of it, so I substituted a picture of one of our previous Saimangs, who is getting an injection through training. So with positive reinforcement, these animals can be trained to accept a syringe and needle without having to be darted or without having to be squeezed. So they cooperate with their own care, and we can learn how to train that to make sure that their care in captivity or in human care is as least stressful as possible. And so this is a picture of Tucker, our Saimang, who is giving us his hip so that our zookeeper can give an injection. And we would do that to provide vaccines or to provide medications or to administer anesthetic agents so that we can do a more thorough veterinary exam or any sort of preventive medical procedures, such as get a blood sample or clean teeth and things like that, so that they can provide good animal care and welfare for their entire lives. Our Javan gibbons have also started to be trained to do this. I just didn't have a great picture of that. We also share our knowledge around the world. As you guys may know, zoos in China often have the reputation to be more on the bad side of the zoo spectrum than on the good side. But there are some good zoos in China that are trying to do better. And one of those is the Nanjing Zoo. This is a picture of me with Director Shen at the Nanjing Hongshan Zoo in Nanjing, China. And they held in 2018 the first ever orangutan husbandry workshop. And myself and several of my colleagues were invited to come and speak on orangutan husbandry so that the Chinese zoos can improve their standards of care. Many times they just don't have access to the knowledge and information they need to do better. And so through this workshop, we were able to provide lectures to representatives from every zoo in China that houses orangutans. They had someone in attendance at this workshop, and we were able to provide information in a husbandry manual that was translated into Chinese. And so I was invited to speak about nutrition and reproduction and veterinary medicine of orangutans to the Chinese delegation. Veterinary expertise is another way that we can help. On the left, I'm speaking with the Orangutan Veterinary Advisory Group. They meet every year. That's a group of veterinarians that work with orangutans in the range countries of Malaysia and Indonesia. And they get together every year to share knowledge and expertise with one another. And so I've had the opportunity to help with that group, although you can see by the looks on their faces, there's different reactions to what I'm saying. I also lecture a lot about different veterinary topics, such as strongyloides, which is a parasite of orangutans that affects young orangutans, both under human care as well as in the rescue and rehabilitation facilities in Indonesia. We've also provided opportunities for Indonesian vets to come to the US to see how animals are managed in human care here, as well as to take part in veterinary procedures and and see equipment and procedures that they may not get the opportunity to do in other parts of the world. And so on the left is with the Orangutan Information Center. He's a veterinarian that works in Sumatra. And his wife, Yeni Saraswati, she works for the Sumatran Orangutan Conservation Program, SOCP. She's a veterinarian for that group. They came and spent 1 month with me, and we traveled to a lot of different zoos. This is in Chicago, Illinois. The Bean, it's a famous sculpture in Chicago that is just a really metal, highly polished thing that's very interesting to look at. At the top right is Adi. Adi is a veterinarian at International Animal Rescue in Ketapang. And he visited when we had an orangutan workshop. And the bottom right there, getting introduced to the Moldorama at the Willis Tower, the tallest building in Chicago, is Jati. Jati is the veterinarian for the Sintang Orangutan Center in Java, and that's my son on the left with him. So we also provide education and outreach. At the bottom is the graphic that's in front of our Javan gibbon exhibit at the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo. And every week we also have keeper chats where staff will visit with guests and talk about Javan gibbons, as well as many of the other Indonesian species we have, and talk about some of the conservation challenges and things that that our guests can do, such as sustainable palm oil and making sure they're aware of the ingredients in the foods and cosmetics that we purchase in the United States and the impact that that has on animals and wildlife in Indonesia. We also share information such as from Suara Owa about through social media and helps to have a more global reach of some of that messaging. Every few years, every year, we have what we call Kids for Nature, where we highlight 3 conservation species or themes. And in 2018, Javan gibbons were one of our highlights. Guests that visit the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo are given a small metal washer that they can use to vote in these fishing wells. And they can vote for one of the 3 programs, and it helps to direct additional conservation funding to these groups. And it's one way that we can help our local guests get involved and kind of feel like they're making a difference in how the money is being spent, so they can choose their favorite conservation group. And lastly, funding. Our zoo does a fair bit of conservation investment. We've invested over $1.2 million US in the last 10 years on in situ conservation programs. So this is where we give money to organizations that are working in the range countries with conservation of various species. And almost a third of that has been spent in Indonesia working with conservation. These are the 5 main partners, Suara Owa and the Coffee and Primate Conservation Project in Sokokembeng. WCS, we do some work with them looking at sharks and ray conservation around Indonesia. SOCP obviously works with orangutans in Sumatra. The Tiger Conservation Campaign, we specifically invest in a program that's helping Sumatran tigers. And then the Orangutan Conservancy is a group here in the United States that facilitates that Orangutan Veterinary Advisory Group meeting every year in Indonesia or Malaysia. And so those are our partners and how we invest in those each year. And occasionally I get to travel and visit with some of these partners and see some of the things that they're doing firsthand. Amber is also with me tonight. She was my travel partner when we last got to visit many of our partners. In the top left, that is the WCS group working with sharks and rays, primarily along the of Sumatra. The top right is the Gento reintroduction site field crew for SOCP. So we're able to go there and visit with that team. The bottom left is part of the team that works with the Orangutan Veterinary Advisory Group. And on the bottom right are some of our bird conservation friends in Sumatra who introduced us to some of the wonderful birds of the Lusur ecosystem there. And then, of course, in the middle, many of you probably recognize that house from some of the other pictures, but there is Wawan and Pakta Supri and his family with Amber and myself getting to see the great work that's going on there in the village of Sokokembang. It's great to make those connections and relationships with so many partners working together to make real the conservation of Javan gibbons and so many other species all around the world. So it's really what we have a passion for, and I think that's probably what most of you also have a passion for and why you're here. So at this point, I can take any questions. Is that okay, Wawan? Or Dimi?
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Joe Smith, for the presentation. The presentation was very colorful and cheery and lots of new stuff that we rarely see here in Indonesia. I'm sure a lot of the participant has a lot of questions to ask. So to begin the next session, we have a discussion from both our speakers, and audience may prepare some questions to be asked to the speakers. For this, I am inviting Mr. Arif Setiawan as moderator for this session. To Mr. Arif Setiawan, the time and place are welcome.
Oke, terima kasih Alika. Thanks for Mbak Aolya and Joe for wonderful story for the fieldwork and fieldwork in the zoo also. And ya, untuk sesi ini kita masih cukup banyak waktu karena kita sampai waktu jam 11 ya Alika ya. We have time until 11. Jadi kalau teman-teman ada yang mau bertanya, dipersilahkan menggunakan raise hand ya. Silahkan nanti kalau ada yang mau bertanya langsung, bisa saya atur jalurnya menggunakan raise hand, ditujukan kepada siapa, oleh siapa, ditujukan kepada siapa, dipersilahkan. Sambil menunggu yang bertanya, mungkin saya juga ada pertanyaan juga untuk Mbak Aolya. Kalau apa ya, bioakustik ya, sebenarnya ini ya hal baru juga, belum banyak mahasiswa ataupun peneliti di Indonesia yang melakukan ini. Sebenarnya apa ya, kalau saya bilang ini kan semacam ya kayak vokal fingerprint gitu loh. Jadi setiap individu itu ternyata punya karakter vokal masing-masing, dan di Owa Jawa ini kenapa tadi yang dipilih hanya yang betina, terus ada nggak mungkin faktor-faktor alam yang mempengaruhi mereka itu melakukan perilaku itu? Karena ini juga nanti I asked to Aolya about the given behavior singing call in the wild, and maybe also what's different behavior in the zoo at the moment, and maybe in the case in Fort Wayne, if there is there any different, because in the wild, like Aolya said that usually they start calling at 7, the climax time, and then reduce the frequency, and how you manage this environment in the zoo, because this is tropical animal, and I think what impact to the behavior of singing. Mungkin itu Mbak Aolya, silahkan.
Baik Mas An. Berarti pertanyaannya pertama. Halo?
Halo, ya, terdengar.
Ya. Kalau berdasarkan penelitian sebelumnya sih, pertama yaitu hujan. Biasanya kalau hujan itu oa tidak akan bersuara, karena maksudnya waktu malamnya hujan atau pagi hujan oa tidak bersuara karena untuk bersuara itu kan memerlukan energi yang tinggi, sedangkan pas hujan kan oa biasanya tidak bisa bergerak. Pergerakannya terbatas untuk mencari makan, jadi energinya lebih dikit untuk memanaskan badannya daripada untuk bersuara. Namun untuk penelitian saya untuk S2 juga meneliti tentang faktor lingkungan, namun untuk hasilnya sendiri belum dipublish. Namun berdasarkan pengamatan saya, malah biasanya kalau suasana mendung itu malah oanya banyak bersuara. Namun kalau sangat terik itu panas itu oanya jarang bersuara gitu Mas. Terus kalau di Kalimantan sendiri kan biasanya ada kebakaran hutan. Nah biasanya kalau ada gangguan semacam asap gitu, itu jadi oa itu tidak banyak bersuara gitu.
Oke. Ada yang mau menambahkan komentar dari jawaban Mbak Aolya? Silahkan. Oke, sementara belum ya. Oke, Joe. I think my question to Aolya is how the environment impact to the singing behavior, and I just curious about in the zoo how this environment impact to the singing of especially Javan gibbon in Fort Wayne.
Well, I'd say at our zoo in Fort Wayne, we see similar patterns of singing as Nur Aolya described. They're very vocal in the morning and not so much at other times of the day. We don't have sonograms on our gibbons, so I don't know if the notes are similar or different. But oftentimes when they go out when they wake up in the morning and leave their bedrooms and go out into our exhibit, one of the first things they do is call, and they do the duet with one another, and it sounds exactly like I hear the Javan gibbons in Sokokimbang sing. So it's to my ears at least, they're very similar. And so I don't know if there's any impact on the singing behavior of being in a zoo versus being in the wild. It looks very similar to me. Someone would maybe need to study that in greater detail, like Nur's sonograms, to maybe understand if there are some subtle differences between.
Oke, interesting. Jadi ternyata di Fort Wayne juga belum ada studi tentang mendetail tentang perilaku bersuara ini kaitannya dengan environment yang ada di sana, dan kata Joe ya ini kesempatan nih kalau ada yang mau penelitian seperti itu. Oke, ini ada satu bertanya dari Mas Catur. Apakah ada perbedaan ciri khas dari suara dari owa pada saat ada ancaman predator atau lainnya? Is there any different singing behavior due to predator attendance surrounding the area? I think this is for untuk Mbak Aolya ya. Mbak Aolya, monggo silakan.
Ya, untuk suara saat ada ancaman itu berbeda kayak beda dengan suara yang biasa dinyanyikan pada pagi hari, baik jantan atau betina. Biasanya sih suaranya itu tadi kayak harassing call itu atau suara yang cuma teriak-teriak aja, maksudnya tidak ada ritme yang jelas begitu. Sangat berbeda dengan suara greet call atau yang male songbird tadi.
Biasanya yang betina atau yang jantan, Mbak, yang bersuara itu? Yang kalau ada
biasanya
predator.
Kalau ada ancaman biasanya malah berdua-duanya bisa bersuara gitu, Mas. Tapi
jantan
biasanya
betina ya?
Iya.
Okay. So that explain for you that usually if any predator, the both male and female make a harassing call, doesn't have a rhythmic call for as usual. So this is the response of predator surrounding them. Silahkan, ada lagi. Silahkan, kalau ada yang mau bertanya langsung dipersilahkan. Gunakan raise hand. Yuk, silahkan. Kalau misalnya butuh diterjemahkan, saya terjemahkan. Saya bantu atau Alika yang mau bantu juga bisa. Silahkan. Siapa ini? Oh, Rima. Ayo, Rima. Mana?
Ya baik, Rima. Jadi kan kita kan biasanya kalau saya pengamatan untuk hari pertama, hari kedua, memang saya stay di tempat yaitu di listening post. Dan OA ini kan teritori, jadi kemungkinan bersuaranya itu dari arah yang itu aja gitu. Maksudnya tidak random banget itu. Jadi biasanya kalau misalnya sudah dengar di mana arah suaranya, untuk hari berikutnya itu coba mendekat ke arah suaranya. Benar enggak sih OA-nya ada di situ atau enggak gitu. Atau memang tadi kayak terima terjadi pantulan gitu. Biasanya itu untuk mastiinnya. Gitu. Nah.
Gimana? Rima?
Iya biasanya, soalnya mereka kan untuk bersuara yang saya rekam ini, yang female songbird ini kan suara untuk menandai daerah teritorinya. Jadi jarang sekali misalnya kelompok lain itu bersuara di area teritorinya kelompok yang lain. Biasanya kalau bersuara di area yang sangat dekat itu biasanya mereka akan bersuara sangat lama dan juga biasanya juga suaranya itu tidak bareng-bareng antar kelompok yang satu dengan yang lain. Biasanya gantian gitu. Jadi juga bisa dideteksi kok ini kelompok yang mana gitu.
Oke. I just want to translate for Joe and Anwar who joining. So Rima asking how's the data collection, because Mbak Aolya collecting singing behavior also record the direction of the calling, where the gibbon come from, and how's this difficulties according to the geographic or topographic condition in the field. And Aolya said that during listening, in the listening post, 2 days is just recording, and then after next days, after 2 days, Aolya try to figure out where is the location of the gibbon call. So try to tracking the calling, and then usually because of the gibbon has a stable range, and they have different time of calling. Its group have a different time for calling. So just for respond one group up to the next group, something like that. And this is a direction of calling also can be used for to map the distribution of the gibbon. Itu ya ya. Oke. Ada lagi? Silahkan. Ini ada yang bertanya dari Arif juga. Kenapa Owa memiliki perilaku unik dibandingkan dengan ape lainnya seperti orangutan, yaitu hanya memiliki satu pasangan? I think this is for both speaker Joe and Aolya can answer. Why the gibbon have unique behavior, because only have one mate, one pair strong bond, something like that. Why the gibbon has a unique behavior compared to other apes like orangutan, because gibbon only has one mate, something like that. Joe, you can respond.
I guess I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a primatologist, but I imagine you guys may be able to provide that answer. Usually, mating structures tie in directly to food availability and types of food and sizes of territory. There may be some correlation there.
Oke, ya. Jadi kata Jo, kemungkinan karena ini saya juga bukan primatologis, ahli primata seperti itu, dan mungkin teman-teman yang di sini lebih paham tentang kondisi di alam. Jadi kemungkinan juga ada faktor ketersediaan pakan dan ukuran area jelajah yang mempengaruhi kenapa itu kuat pasangannya seperti itu. Mbak Aolya gimana komentarnya?
Ya mungkin kalau sepengetahuan saya ya tadi benar menurut yang Joe jawab, dan juga itu juga merupakan proses panjang dari evolusinya, dan juga mungkin Owa Jawa ini kan monogami. Mungkin dari banyak teman atau ya dengar mitos kalau Owa Jawa ini pasangannya itu aja, terus kalau misalnya satu mati nanti yang satu akan ikut mati. Nah itu tuh kayaknya kemungkinan besar mitos, karena jadi benar dalam satu kelompok cuma ada satu individu jantan dan betina untuk induknya. Namun kalau jika pasangannya itu bisa didisplay atau ditendang dan diganti oleh individu lain. Jadi ada palakor, babinor juga ada terjadi di gibbon gitu. Jadi kalau pasangan seumur hidup itu saat ini mitos. Jadi monogaminya itu bisa diganti oleh pasangan yang lain. Demikian kalau dari saya.
Oke, nice. Jadi seperti itu. So Aolya also supporting connecting Joe's answer that yes, because of the fruit availability, and for monogamous gibbon, and Aolya has an argument that maybe this is a myth. Because sometimes in the wild population, if male die or female die, they will looking for another pair for breeding. So if a monogamous in Japan gibbon, he said that this is like a myth. We have to prove in the wild, something like that. Oke, masih ada di pertanyaan, ada lagi? Masih banyak waktu ini. Ini dari sahabat Owa. Siapa ya ini sahabat Owa? Izin bertanya, untuk pakan Owa Jawa di Fort Wayne Zoo apakah sama di habitatnya atau penyesuaian dengan pakan yang ada di Fort Wayne Zoo? So this is question for Joe. For Javan gibbon food in the Fort Wayne, is this the same as food in the native habitat, or just food in the surrounding area?
No, that's a good question. Food that's here in the United States is very different than what Javan gibbons would eat in the wild. And, you know, we have to be careful because commercially available fruit is not the same as wild fruit. You know, the fruit that has been raised on farms for human consumption often has low fiber, high sugar content, and a lot of water. We like to grow our food to be sweet and juicy, fruits and vegetables. That is not like the wild fruits and nuts and seeds that Javan gibbons and other gibbons and other primates eat in the wild. So we have to look at the nutrient profile of those wild foods and try to recreate that nutrient profile with the foods that we have available in the United States. And so what a diet for a captive primate might look like would include, we have a formulated biscuit, almost like a kibble that can be fed, that's made especially for primates, that's high fiber. And then we also use lots of leafy greens, leafy vegetables, and actually very little commercial fruit, because that fruit is so high in sugar and unlike the fruit that they would be eating in the wild. So lots of vegetables, lots of leafy greens. They also get what we call browse, which is wild leaves and stems from the trees that we have that are native to the United States. But what we have here is a deciduous hardwood forest, not a tropical rainforest. So it's very different than what's available there. But again, we focus on the nutrient profile of what gibbons eat in the wild and replicate that with what we have available here.
Oke, jadi pertanyaan menarik dari Mas sahabat Owa tadi, kata Jo, bahwa memang ini kendala yang susah karena kita berbeda sekali dengan di alam. Jadi yang pertama dilakukan adalah mempelajari profil nutrien kontennya dari yang di alam itu seperti apa, terus kita bandingkan dengan profil nutrisi yang ada di sekitar zoo seperti itu, dan dari situlah nanti disesuaikan. Karena kalau menggunakan komersial, makanan buah-buahan komersial itu, kata Jo, itu terlalu banyak gula, terlalu banyak air, dan juga rendah seratnya, dan dari sini kita juga belajar setelah profil nutrisinya, kita ada feed yang diformulasikan di alam seperti itu, dan kita juga sediakan biji-bijian, daun, dan ada beberapa tanaman lokal yang dipakai untuk sumber pakan di sana. Kira-kira begitu Mas Owa. Terus ini ada lagi Hardiansah. Sifat monogamus owa Jawa ini sudah berlangsung sejak awal atau berubah secara gradual akibat perubahan luas hutan, dan semakin seringnya owa berjumpa atau diburu oleh manusia. Pertanyaan saya ini muncul karena melihat paralelitas dari perubahan manusia urban yang mengadopsi model keluarga nukleus yang sebelumnya dalam rural. Oke, ini mungkin Mbak Aolya bisa komentari tentang ini ya, tentang apa sifat monogami, how the monogamous of gibbons is this already in the historical evolution or just because of habitat change of forest destruction or something like that.
Jadi kalau sifat monogami owa Jawa ini sudah berlangsung lama, maksudnya sudah dari dulu berdasarkan evolusinya. Namun untuk karena kemajuan pengamatan untuk owa Jawa dan informasi yang bertambah, jadi kita dapat tahu bahwa monogamisnya owa Jawa juga pasangannya tadi bisa berubah gitu. Ya hampir mirip dengan sistem monogamis pada manusia. Jadi untuk saat ini sih belum perubahan habitat terhadap monogamis owa Jawa. Namun setahu saya monogami owa Jawa ini sudah terjadi dari dulu, walaupun misalnya habitatnya rusak atau di banyak manusia juga tetap kondisinya monogami gitu. Tapi juga ditemukan di alam liar juga kadang satu kelompok itu untuk individu dewasanya itu lebih dari 2, tapi itu sangat jarang sekali. Gitu.
Oke, jadi ada, kalau mungkin saya tambahkan untuk jawaban ini, karena untuk owa Jawa ini sebenarnya ya memang banyak penelitian terbaru kalau menyebutkan ya tidak pure monogami seperti itu, dan ini bisa terjadi di banyak ada penelitian di Halimun juga seperti itu, Pak jantannya ditendang oleh betina di sana ganti dengan jantan yang lain, dan di Kalimantan juga seperti itu. Dan ya kalau saya sih lebih suka menyebutnya owa ini living pair gitu, jadi memang hidup berpasangan tapi tidak pure monogami gitu. Oke. Ada lagi. This is ini untuk teman-teman yang hadir di sini, ada ini kalau ada mau pertanyaan langsung atau komunikasi lebih lanjut, ada email dari Dr. Jo, silahkan dicatat mungkin kalau mau bertanya langsung atau mungkin membuka kesempatan atau bagaimana, bisa nggak ada kegiatan yang didukung atau seperti apa, silahkan. Oke, ada pertanyaan lagi?
Mas Wawan, boleh bertanya nggak nih?
Yuk.
Mungkin langsung on mic aja ya.
Ya, dari siapa? Silahkan.
Oke. Ini dari Alika Demetria.
Oke.
Ya, itu pertanyaannya untuk Dr. Joe Smith. So, Dr. Joe Smith, my questions is: are there any endemic animals in Fort Wayne Zoo? Well, I know there is one, such as Javan gibbon, endemic to Indonesian. But my question is, how is the Fort Wayne Zoo build the habitats that are for for the endemic creatures, because endemic creatures only originate from certain areas with certain condition, climates, and so how the Fortune Zoo adjust to that difference? Thank you very much.
So we can in a zoo setting. There are two reasons why we want to pay attention to when we're creating habitats for zoo animals. One is, what do they require to have good health and good welfare? And two, we want to make sure the habitat represents the natural habitat in the wild, so that our guests can understand that this is a tropical species as opposed to a desert species or a temperate species, and make sure that they are appreciating the wild places, not just the animals. And so we do that in a couple of different ways. We make sure that there are things like temperature guidelines, that if it's too hot or too cold, the animals don't go outside, they stay in climate controlled buildings if it gets too cold. That way they're not exposed to temperatures that are outside of what is good for their own health and welfare. Similarly, we have to utilize plants that grow in our climate. So, we can't have tropical trees in our Javan gibbon exhibit, but we can have deciduous trees that are native that might look similar, and so we can, like you saw in our exhibit, we took the cherry and oak and hickory trees that grow native to Indiana, and we supplemented that with artificial vines to make that habitat look more tropical. And for our animals, we measure success by whether or not they're exhibiting natural behaviors. And so if they are displaying the same behaviors they would display in the wild, that tells us that we're providing a habitat that's close to what they would get. It's not perfect, but it's a substitute with what we have. Just like with the diets earlier, we have to make substitutions based on on what's here. And at the same time, we also want to provide an exhibit that makes people understand what it looks like in the Indonesian rainforest. And we do that in several different ways. When you saw the map of our zoo, there's a large geodesic dome, a large walk-through dome. And inside that dome, we can provide tropical plants. And so our guests, when they come to our Indonesian area, they first walk through this dome that's heated in the wintertime and has lots of high humidity, and it feels very tropical. It feels like Sumatra. And so when you walk through, it gives our guests the feel for what it might be like in a tropical rainforest.
Oke. Alika bisa nerjemahin untuk teman-teman yang lain ya.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Smith, Dr. Joe Smith, for the answers. So rather than trying to create like a new environment, but trying to substitute certain conditions that are similar with the endemic condition. Okay, so but I do like to ask what's in one way earlier you said about temperatures guideline, but what else other than the temperature? Like, are there like technologies, like advanced technologies that you use so the habitats would be like really similar to better enhance up the living quality of the endemic creatures or something like that?
The only technology that we utilize are light timers. So we look at photo period the amount of daylight and darkness that they receive. For tropical species, it's usually even throughout most of the year, and so the photo period doesn't always have an effect on their behavior. But it is something we utilize for a lot of other species where breeding seasons or migrations or things like that. And we do use light timers to make sure that those photo periods are like what they would experience in the wild, so that, again, our measure of success is whether or not they're displaying natural behaviors. That includes, foraging and reproduction and, grooming each other and all of the things that you would expect in a ethogram from wild animals. So nothing special about technology. We do use enrichment devices, and our staff get very creative with environmental enrichment, where they can create puzzle feeders and other things to increase foraging time. One of the big differences between animals in human care and animals in the wild is that animals in the wild spend most of their time looking for food and acquiring food. And that's true not just for Javan gibbons, but most species. And so in a zoo setting, they get their food from us delivered on a platter, just like they're at a restaurant. So they don't have to spend as much time searching for food. And so that can change the balance of behaviors that an animal will exhibit in the wild, or I'm sorry, in a zoo. And so one of the things we try to do through enrichment devices is to prolong foraging behavior. So we want to make it more difficult for them to acquire their food and make it more complex, where they have to pick the food out of a puzzle feeder, or we scatter it all throughout their exhibit, so they do have to forage and find their food in different places every day. It's not just in a bowl or on a plate every day where it's easy. Those are some of the things we do to make sure that it's more like the wild, and their behaviors also look like behaviors that we've experienced in the wild.
Oke, Alika, bisa dibantu terjemahin untuk teman-teman yang lain ya? Yuk.
Iya, oke. Jadi thank you very much again, Dr. Joe Smith, for the answers. Very enlightening. Jadi teman-teman, tadi pertanyaan saya tuh tentang apakah ada binatang endemik di Fort Winnie Zoo, dan salah satunya kan adalah Javan gibbon Owa Jawa. Nah, saya tuh tadi nanya bagaimana sih di Fort Winnie Zoo itu menyesuaikan kondisi habitatnya dengan yang ada di wilayah endemiknya. Nah, bagaimananya tuh maksudnya lebih ke cara-cara yang digunakan. Nah, jadi tuh tadi itu dari penjelasan Dr. Joe Smith adalah di Fort Winnie Zoo tuh memang tidak bisa untuk jelas-jelas benar-benar membuat habitat baru yang sangat amat serupa dengan habitat aslinya dari binatang-binatang tersebut. Tapi dengan teknologi-teknologi seperti temperature guidelines, atau mungkin mengatur temperaturnya ya, atau tadi juga ada tadi saya catat nih, foto period juga ada. Nah, itu tuh cara-cara lah, jadi sebisa mungkin itu dibuat serupa, seperti menanam pohon-pohon yang memang bukan endemik dari misalkan dari Indonesia, tapi memiliki sifatnya yang sama, seperti kalau tidak ada evergreen trees, tapi menggunakan deciduous trees, pohon-pohonan yang menggugurkan saat musim kemarau. Jadi sebisa mungkin Fort Winnie Zoo itu menciptakan habitat yang serupa, sehingga tolak ukurnya habitat yang sudah diciptakan itu sesuai atau tidak ya kita dilihat dari apakah mereka menunjukkan natural behavior, perilaku alami yang biasanya ditampilkan saat di alam bebas lah, istilahnya seperti itu. Nah, biasanya sih Fort Winnie Zoo ini tuh mereka lebih banyak di mengotak-ngatik di foraging behavior, karena kan biasanya kalau di kebun binatang atau di taman safari atau ya misalkan dalam tidak di alam liar kan kita bisa memberi makan itu ya secara mudah lah, like on a platter, on a restaurant, seperti kita pesen makanan di McDonald atau di KFC gitu. Nah, jadi di sini tuh staff-staffnya juga jadi kreatif dalam ini tuh, mereka membuat puzzle kayak feeder-feeder yang kayak mungkin ada atau seperti apa. Jadi mereka tuh ada usahanya untuk menerima makanan tersebut. Nah, itu kurang lebih itu sih seperti yang saya tangkap.
Dan yang untuk tambahan aja, yang jelas yang ini kan gitu, jadi ini untuk eksibisi, jadi supaya orang pengunjung juga paham, dan ini akan dikontrol juga dari kesehatan dan dari sisi animal welfare-nya seperti itu. Terus ada beberapa jenis yang pohon yang seperti oak. Oak itu kalau di Jawa ya sebenarnya ada pohon pasang, itu satu famili kayak Quercus atau Fagacia, itu hampir sama dengan ada di Jawa juga itu. Nah, itu juga pakai itu juga. Kurang lebih seperti itu ya. Ada lagi, silahkan. Masih ada, there is 15 minutes more. If any questions, comments. Untuk teman-teman yang mau komunikasi dengan Dr. Jo, sudah ada emailnya. Silahkan nanti kalau mau kontak langsung, mau bertanya langsung, silahkan. Itu di chat ada emailnya Dr. Jo. Ada lagi yang mau bertanya? One more question, Joe. Is there any opportunity for intensive students to study in Fort Wayne or exchange experience in Indiana, in Fort Wayne? How to if there any how to get there?
So we don't have a formal program, but we are willing to work with anyone to create a customized experience. The people that you saw in my presentation, they were all veterinarians, but you don't have to be a veterinarian. We worked directly with their organizations to provide those opportunities, and they didn't come just to Fort Wayne, but they also visited with other organizations in the United States as well. So they might do like 1 month in Fort Wayne, and then 1 month with another colleague at another zoo or another city to get some diversity of experience. If that's something anyone's interested in pursuing, they can talk to me about that. You know, the funding opportunity is we have to figure out who's providing funding for some of that. There's also the visa issue, and certainly the pandemic has made travel more challenging. But I suspect that will eventually get better with time. So it may not be something we can do soon because of the pandemic, but probably in another year or so, travel, I'm hoping, will be back to normal, and we can start to provide opportunities like that again. So, but there's not a formal program. There's not a website or anything to look at. It's something that we just work with directly and create custom opportunities for individuals.
Oke, jadi ini kesempatan teman-teman di sini, terutama yang sudah kenal di acara ini. Katanya Jok, kalau di Fort Wayne tidak ada formal aplikasi seperti yang khusus tentang acara ini, tapi ini membuka kesempatan juga kalau mau membuat sebuah ya customize istilahnya studi atau apapun yang bisa dilakukan. Silahkan menghubungi Joe atau Fort Wayne melalui websitenya. Terus ini juga tidak, kalau dari yang sudah ada itu biasanya mereka veterinary, dokter hewan, tapi Joe bilang tidak harus dokter hewan juga. Kalau teman-teman ada berminat juga silahkan hubungi. Tapi ini karena situasi pandemi, karena ini juga masih susah untuk travel kemana-mana. Saya Joe bilang kalau mungkin di tahun ini dan silahkan untuk hubungi. Oke, seperti itu ya. Saya kira oke, mungkin dari saya tutup sekian. Mohon maaf kalau ada kekurangan ataupun ya kurang jelas dalam memfasilitasi acara ini. Silahkan nanti kalau misalnya ada yang mau komunikasi langsung dengan Joe, dengan Mbak Aolya, atau dengan kami, dengan teman-teman di KP3 bisa memfasilitasinya, bisa langsung komunikasi sendiri. Dan saya kembalikan ke Alika untuk waktunya. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih kembali Mas Wawan telah memimpin sesi diskusi ini dengan baik. Tadi banyak ya pertanyaan-pertanyaan juga. Ada yang tadi sampai keluarga nuklir itu, wah keren. Saya juga agak bingung itu bacanya, tapi keren-keren ya. Jadi di sini udah sampai di akhir sesi diskusi kita. This is the end of the discussion. Terima kasih kepada para partisipan yang telah ikut aktif dalam diskusi ini. Thank you to the audience that had participated actively. And also thank you for the speakers, Dr. Joe Smith dan Mbak Nur Aolya, for the information and knowledge which have been given to us, and may it be useful for us to time to come. And again, I would like to thank both speakers for joining us, for giving new information, for giving us new insights, for broaden our knowledge, and especially new stuff from Fort Wayne Zoo dan Mbak Nur Aolya tentang penelitiannya bioakustik. Terima kasih. Kemudian juga untuk Mr. Arif Setiawan as moderator. Dan last but not least, our dearest participant that has been the best audience throughout this event. Thank you for joining us. But before we end this event for the day, let us first take documentation of this webinar. Kita akan foto dulu ya teman-teman. Mungkin teman-teman bisa on cam lalu menggunakan virtual background, atau mungkin kalau sulit menggunakan virtual background tidak apa, yang penting on cam nanti.
Alika?
Oh ya?
Bisa ada closing statement juga?
Oh, mungkin nanti habis foto.
Oke.
Biar foto dulu, habis itu kita closing statement. Mungkin supaya belum pada keluar-keluar ini, Mas Wawan. Nanti takutnya pada keluar-keluar kayak foto kita. So before I give my closing statement, we should take a picture first. Mungkin bisa dipimpin oleh Kemal. Oh, Kamilia, sorry Kamilia. Oke. Monggo, silakan di countdown dulu.
Sebentar ya, ini view-nya diubah dulu. Ya, jadi ada 3 slide. Ya, mulai ya. 1, 2, 3. Ya, lagi. 1, 2, 3. Oke, lagi 1, 2, 3. Ya, sudah. Terima kasih.
All right. That's the end of the photo session. And last but not least, the closing statement. Our forests and all within is indeed our legacy. We must do our part to preserve the beauty of the nature and our forest and every living being. And finally, I am Demetria Lika Putri on behalf of the committee and from Suara Owa, so wishing you a wonderful day. We hope to see you again, Dr. Joe Smith, Nur Aolya, in the next event, in the next MSP event, and with the spirit to inspire people to preserve our endangered primates. And by this, I will be ending today's event. Thank you and have a good day. Terima kasih dan sampai jumpa. Yay. Thank you. Terima kasih teman-teman atas partisipasinya.
Oke, terima kasih semuanya. Thank you, Joe, for the time. Mbak Aolya, terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Wawan.
Sama-sama, terima kasih. Saya live dulu.
See you in the near future, Joe.
I hope so. Soon.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. And send my best regard to our colleague in the zoo and your family.
I will. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Live YouTube-nya bisa di ending.